Some performances redefine what acting can be, yet somehow, the Academy let them slip through its fingers. Today, we're looking at 7 roles that shaped entire genres and left marks deeper than many Oscar-winning turns. Let's begin. Number 1, Peter O'Toole in Lawrence of Arabia, 1962. I believe we can all agree that Peter O'Toole's work, Lawrence, remains one of cinema's definitive feats of screen acting. This was a performance that operates simultaneously on a mythic scale and a human level. His control of physical presence alone is extraordinary. The feline stillness when Lawrence enters the officer's bar, the barely perceptible tightening of his jaw as he processes the brutality he's capable of, and the way his gait changes from jaunty confidence to rigid defiance as the character's self-image corrodes. One of O'Toole's finest moments comes in here in the tent scene with Otta. While Otta boasts about his love of pleasure,
he will come because it is his pleasure.
Thy mother mated with a scorpion.
O'Toole barely moves, just a flicker in the eyes, a half smile as Otta slowly realizes he has been roped. What makes his Lawrence historically important is how he merges classical star charisma with modern psychological ambiguity. Earlier epic heroes were sculpted from certainty. O'Toole builds Lawrence from contradictions. His voice drifts between airy lightness and clipped authority, signaling someone performing greatness as much as embodying it. The famous Nothing Is Written sequence crystallizes this. The brightness in his eyes is both triumph and mania, a proud declaration and a warning sign. Few actors had ever captured self-mythologizing this precisely. So, why did the Oscars pass him on? Well, it was a confluence of very specific factors and not just bad timing. Let's start with the elephant in the room, Gregory Peck's long overdue recognition. Peck had never won an Oscar despite being one of Hollywood's most respected leading men. Voters saw To Kill a Mockingbird as a moral corrective and viewed Atticus Finch as a symbol of decency during a year defined by civil rights tension, a socially resonant anchor that overshadowed Lawrence's moral turmoil. Another reason was that, to the Academy, O'Toole's performance was too modern. In 1962, Academy voters still favored clean arcs and upright heroes. O'Toole's Lawrence is intentionally unreadable, unsettling, eroticized, violent, visionary, and self-deluding. Many voters admired the film while misunderstanding the acting, interpreting the ambiguity as coldness rather than craftsmanship. Finally, the industry underestimated psychological interiority. Epic acting at the time meant scale, volume, presence, and stature. O'Toole instead played the contradictions, euphoria, cruelty, and self-loathing. Critics recognized the innovation, but many voters saw a man behaving strangely rather than an actor redefining the form. The Academy would later come to regret this, as O'Toole's 8 later nominations reveal how the industry kept trying, unsuccessfully, to compensate for missing the most pivotal performance of his career. Today, directors and acting historians repeatedly cite O'Toole's Lawrence as the prototype for the introspective yet mythic protagonist found in modern epics from Apocalypse Now to There Will Be Blood. O'Toole created the template for the charismatic, psychologically fractured leading man, a blueprint that another actor would soon push into ferocity, obsession, and volatility so intense the Academy would again blink at greatness. Number 2, Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver, 1976. Up next is Robert De Niro's portrayal of Travis Bickle. This is one of the most meticulously constructed descents into psychological collapse ever put on film. What makes it so enduring is not just the rage or volatility, it's the precision. Every behavioral shift is intentional. The clip delayed responses in early scenes, the awkward stiffness of someone unused to human connection, and the gradual sharpening of his gaze as isolation mutates into mission. Even his posture changes, shoulders pulled forward, neck slightly extended, a man physically leaning toward confrontation long before his mind fully commits. The preparation was famously obsessive. De Niro actually worked 12-hour taxi shifts in New York, absorbing the rhythms of late-night alienation and the fractured conversations of passengers. He kept a diary in Travis's voice, which he used as an internal script to track the character's mental drift, and his crucial improvisations like,
"You talking to me? Well, then who the hell else are you talking? You talking to me?"
became one of cinema's most famous lines and internet memes. The genius in this is these weren't random flourishes, they were extensions of the diary's logic, with Travis performing the hero he can only imagine being. So, if De Niro was so great, why did the Oscars avoid awarding him? One reason was the violence was politically radioactive. The film was released months after real-world incidents involving urban crime dominated headlines. Its graphic, blood-soaked finale alarmed voters at a moment when the industry was being scrutinized for on-screen brutality. So rewarding it felt dangerous? Secondly, Travis Bickle was morally disorienting to voters. He was not a cautionary villain or a cathartic hero. He was both. Many Academy members found the ambiguity nihilistic rather than insightful. The psychological nuance that critics praised was interpreted by voters as uncomfortable opacity. This made the Best Actor category favor safer gravitas. Here, De Niro was up against Peter Finch's prophetic newsroom rage in Network, which was powered by clear political messaging. This was a performance that declared its theme cleanly, unlike De Niro's, which forced the viewer to interrogate their complicity. Finally, the film itself polarized the older Academy bloc. Younger critics hailed it as a generational jolt, while older voters saw it as symptomatic of New Hollywood's moral decay, and that divide strongly influenced the ballot. Now, after decades of retrospectives, critics and scholars repeatedly rank De Niro's Travis among the greatest film performances ever captured. It revitalized method acting, reshaped the portrayal of loners and anti-heroes, and became the benchmark for cinematic psychological portraiture. Although O'Toole introduced the fractured epic hero, De Niro weaponized that fracture, and from there, another actor would take the intensity of interior conflict into a biography, portraying a real figure with so much complexity and honesty that the Academy would once again look away. Number 3. Denzel Washington in Malcolm X, 1992. Number 3 is a very familiar name. It's Denzel Washington's work in Malcolm X. But honestly, this is not a portrayal in the traditional biopic sense, it's a full-scale embodiment. Rather than mimic Malcolm's cadence or lean on recognizable speeches, Denzel maps the man's evolution through 4 distinct physical and vocal phases. The quick, wiry charm of Malcolm Little, the coiled, searching stillness of prison conversion, the authoritative precision of the Nation of Islam years, and finally, the open, reflective calm of his Mecca transformation. His posture widens as Malcolm's influence grows. His voice drops half a register as he adopts oratory discipline. Even his gaze changes, no longer defensive, but penetrating and invitational. Spike Lee structured the film to let Denzel do something biopics rarely allow: portray a life in motion rather than a life summarized. The performance doesn't ascend toward a single awards-bait climax. Instead, it's a continual layering of intellect, vulnerability, rage, hope, and spiritual clarity. It's the kind of performance that feels inhabited rather than executed. But even with all these, the Oscars avoided it. This wasn't simply an Oscars got it wrong moment. The context behind this historical snub mattered at the time. Firstly, the film's political directness made voters uneasy. The early 1990s Academy skewed heavily towards older, white, and cautious audiences who shunned films critiquing American institutions. Malcolm's critiques of systemic racism, police brutality, and media manipulation made many voters resistant to celebrating a film they viewed as confrontational. Another reason was the fear of the film being too recent in its cultural wounds. Unlike most biopics, Malcolm X dealt with a figure whose ideology was still polarizing in mainstream discourse. The Academy historically prefers safe distance biographical material, and Malcolm was anything but distant or safe. Then there was the career win the Academy does when a legend of the industry finally has a chance late in their career. Al Pacino's win was openly understood as a career Oscar. Pacino had lost 7 times before Scent of a Woman. Many voters also publicly admitted in Academy oral histories and later interviews that they were giving Pacino his due. The performance they rewarded was broad, familiar, and emotionally declarative, the exact opposite of Denzel's political and psychological complexity. And Spike Lee's contentious relationship with Hollywood didn't help. Lee's public criticism of the industry's treatment of black filmmakers definitely quietly influenced voting blocs. Although today, directors, actors, and historians routinely rank Denzel's Malcolm among the greatest screen performances ever recorded, it is still a shame that such a moving performance was never given the recognition it deserved. And the Academy still never learned from Denzel's snub, as decades later they were no more prepared for a performance just as emotionally intense, but this time filtered through addiction, tragedy, and irreversible human collapse. Number 4, Ellen Burstyn in Requiem for a Dream, 2000. Ellen Burstyn's turn as Sarah Goldfarb isn't just the emotional core of Requiem for a Dream, it's the film's entire soul. Amid Darren Aronofsky's feverish editing, pulverizing sound design, and relentless descent into addiction, Burstyn delivers a tragedy that's heartbreakingly small and human. While the other characters spiral into hell through drugs, crime, and desperation, Sarah's collapse is quieter, a lonely widow's attempt to feel seen again. Her arc is the slow poisoning of hope. Burstyn charts Sarah's decline with harrowing precision. Early scenes glow with a jittery warmth, the nervous excitement over a potential TV appearance, the compulsive comfort of her red dress, and the way she clings to the idea of being on the show. As Sarah becomes dependent on diet pills, Burstyn shifts her rhythms entirely. Her speech accelerates, her hands tremble, and her body tightens as if she's shrinking inward. Later scenes in the hospital and electroshock sequences push the performance into something almost unbearable, yet never showy. She remains frighteningly present, not acting madness, but slipping into it. But then again, like the previous performances, why didn't the Oscars reward it? Like we've established earlier, the Academy voters have always been known to be conservative. The subject matter in this movie made voters profoundly uncomfortable. Requiem was considered too disturbing by many Academy members. Several openly admitted they couldn't finish the film. An automatic death sentence for acting recognition. Also, Aronofsky's editing style alienated traditional voters. The rapid-fire montages, hallucinations, and body horror imagery created the impression of a shock film, not a prestige drama. Burstyn's work was trapped inside a movie many voters dismissed as extreme. And like always, it was somebody else's crowning year. This time, it was the Julia Roberts year. Roberts' Erin Brockovich campaign was a juggernaut, heavily promoted, widely loved, and perfectly aligned with the Academy's preference for charismatic, empowering performances. Burstyn's quiet implosion never stood a chance against a full-scale Hollywood star narrative. Add to that Lionsgate's minimal campaign, where the studio only gave Burstyn a tiny awards budget compared to Roberts' multi-million-dollar push. And with the Oscars often coming down to exposure, Burstyn had almost none. But today, acting schools dissect her monologues. Critics regularly rank it among the decade's greatest performances. Compared to De Niro's psychological breakdown in Taxi Driver, Burstyn offers a collapse rooted not in menace but in vulnerability, kind that devastates rather than terrifies. And while some actors rely on physical transformation, others reinvent themselves through pure emotional rewiring. Number 5. Jim Carrey in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, 2004. Jim Carrey's performance as Joel Barish remains one of the most quietly devastating turns of the 2000s, precisely because it is so unlike anything audiences had come to expect from him. Carrey built his career on hyper-expressive physical comedy, rubber-faced mayhem, and big emotional gestures. Eternal Sunshine demanded the opposite: stillness, understatement, and a deeply internal sadness. That contrast alone is part of why the Academy froze. It didn't fit their template of what a serious performance from a comedic star was supposed to look like. In the film, Carrey plays Joel, a man whose emotions sit behind glass, withdrawn, hesitant, aching for connection, yet terrified of vulnerability. His eyes do more work here than entire monologues did in his earlier films. The trembling awkwardness in the train scene with Clementine, the bitter disappointment of their arguments, the soft panic during memory erasure. Carrey expresses a lifetime of emotional damage with the quietest shifts in posture and microexpression. It's a masterclass in restraint and a drastic recalibration of his talent. So why did the Academy ignore Carrey? One answer: genre bias. The film's blend of sci-fi, romance, surrealism, and non-linear memory collapse put it far outside the Academy's comfort zone. They rewarded the screenplay but treated the acting as too unconventional for major categories. Add to that Carrey's reputation as a comedian. For years, the Academy has had a long history of sidelining comedic actors when they cross genres. Many voters openly saw Carrey as the rubber-faced guy from Ace Ventura, not a dramatic contender, even after The Truman Show and Man on the Moon. Finally, the Academy has always resisted performers who break type unless the transformation is loud. So when comedians win Oscars, it's almost always for extreme physical roles or gritty transformations. Carrey's pivot, by contrast, was whisper soft. Subtlety is often harder to recognize and easier to overlook. Now, over 20 years later, Joel Barish has become an emotional touchstone, a portrait of insecurity, heartbreak, and longing that resonates far beyond genre. But this genre bias, this resistance to performances that don't fit the Academy's usual boxes, returned in full force a decade ago for one of the most respected actresses of her generation. Number 6. Amy Adams in Arrival, 2016. Amy Adams' performance in Arrival is one of the rare cases where an actor elevates a cerebral film into something profoundly human. The movie's structure depends entirely on whether the audience believes Louise Banks' emotional intelligence, grief, and slow-building clarity, and Adams delivers all three with microscopic precision. Her work is quiet, yes, but not passive. It's a performance built on internal gravity. You watch her think, you watch her hurt, and you watch her carry the weight of personal loss and global responsibility simultaneously. Her portrayal of Louise is riddled with tiny, lived-in skin details, the hesitations in her voice when communicating with the heptapods, the way her eyes soften when she begins to understand their language, aching resolve in the final montage once the film's non-linear truth clicks into place. Adams takes an intellectual narrative challenge, the idea that learning a language rewires perception and makes it emotionally legible. It's a performance rooted in empathy and restraint, revealing deep emotion only in fleeting, devastating flashes. But even with all of these, the Academy never even nominated her. Yes, it is true that the film itself won an Oscar for Best Sound Editing, and science fiction leads almost never win Best Actress unless the film disguises itself as a drama or biopic. Yes, Arrival is unapologetically sci-fi, and many voters still treat the genre as technical rather than performance-driven. But a performance like that should never be a victim of genre bias. And like that wasn't enough, that year saw a historically crowded Best Actress field. The year 2016 was one of the tightest races of the decade, dominated by roles with louder emotional registers like Emma Stone's musical charm, Portman's transformation in Jackie, and Hubert's provocative psychological complexity. This resulted in Adams' controlled subtlety being drowned out by flashier contenders. Now, a decade later, critics now consider Arrival the defining performance of Adams' career, with many claiming it as the film where her emotional subtlety, intuition, and depth reached their peak. The year 2016 is gone, and just like Carrie in Eternal Sunshine, she was snubbed mostly due to the Academy bias against science fiction. And if Adams represents the brilliance of looking inward, the next performance shows the exact opposite. A descent so outwardly unsettling that it becomes impossible to forget. Number 7. Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler, 2014. Jake Gyllenhaal's work in Nightcrawler is one of the most chilling character constructions of the 21st century, not because Louis Bloom is loud or theatrical, but because he's carved out of politeness, hunger, and sociopathic clarity. Gyllenhaal reportedly lost nearly 30 pounds for the role, but the physical change isn't just cosmetic, it becomes the character's architecture. The way Bloom leans forward like a starving coyote, the stiff, almost reptilian posture, the too wide smile, everything about his movement signals a predator trying very hard to look human. The eyes are the real engine. They never stop searching, calculating, assessing. Watch the scene where he says,
"Now, when I say that I want these things, I mean that I want them, and I don't want to have to ask again."
His lip quivers, not with the emotion, but with the strain of maintaining composure. His eyes flicker with something halfway between need and threat. It's a moment where the mask slips just enough to reveal the void underneath. These micro-expressions aren't improvisational tics. They're Bloom's internal playbook. Even the few imperfect lines people debate, like the awkward exchange after he emerges from the wealthy couple's murder scene, the second I know in the assistant's death moment, ironically highlight the character's artificiality. Bloom is bad at sounding human, so the stiffness and mistimed beats feel intentional within the psychological framework Gyllenhaal created. So, why did the Oscars ignore it without even a nomination? Well, Nightcrawler didn't get a nomination for Best Picture, and without a Best Picture slot, the film lacked the structural support almost every Best Actor winner relies on. Another major reason was because 2014 became a two-horse race. On one side was Redmayne's transformative prestige biopic, and on the other side was Keaton's comeback arc. Truth be told, Gyllenhaal never stood a chance against that storyline. Add to that how historically, extremely dark protagonists win only when the film softens them. You'd understand why such a generational performance went unnoticed for so long. Fast forward to a decade later, and Nightcrawler is now widely cited as Gyllenhaal's defining performance and one of the decade's great character studies. Yet, he remains one of modern Hollywood's most baffling repeat Oscar snubs. But Gyllenhaal's fate underscores a larger truth, that even the most astonishing performances can be let down by the film, or, in the case of other performances in this video, can slip between the cracks of awards politics. So, when you look across these 7 performances, the pattern becomes unmistakable. These aren't just great roles, they're landmarks in screen acting. Yet each one slipped through the cracks because something bigger got in the way. Some were boxed out by genre bias, dismissed because they lived in sci-fi, romance, or psychological horror. Others ran into controversy or discomfort, pushing boundaries in ways awards voters weren't ready to embrace. And many lost the spotlight to industry narratives, where career momentum or prestige packaging mattered more than the work itself. That's why conversations like this matter, because awards tell one story, but film history often tells a very different one. Now it's your turn. Which performance do you think deserved an Oscar but never got it? Drop your picks in the comments, argue your case, and if you want more breakdowns like this, hit follow, because we've got plenty more film analysis coming.